Do not let him sign that license. Clara Whitaker's voice cut through the marble wedding hall one breath before Dante Moretti's black onyx ring touched the paper that could bury his empire. Every chandelier above the altar seemed to freeze. Every violin string went silent, and every gun hidden beneath a tailored black jacket shifted toward the woman in the white dress. Clara stood in the center aisle, very large, very still, her veil trembling against her soft shoulders, one hand gripping a black leather badge walla high enough for the whole room to see. The gold credential inside caught the candlelight like a blade. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then the whispers came. Is that the bride? That's the replacement? God, he let her wear white. A laugh flickered somewhere behind a wall of orchids, thin and cruel. Clara did not turn toward it. She kept her eyes on Dante Moretti, the most feared Sicilian-American boss in New York, a man carved from black silk, old money, and controlled violence. Dante stood at the altar with 2 bodyguards behind him and a priest too terrified to breathe. He did not reach for her. He did not defend her. He only looked at the badge, then at the marriage license beneath his hand, and the room understood something terrible. This was not a bride interrupting her own humiliation. This was a warning. Vivian Cross, draped in silver couture near the front pew, smiled as if Clara's existence offended the architecture. How dramatic, she murmured, loud enough for the first 3 rows. A county clerk playing officer at a wedding she was lucky to be invited to. Another ripple of laughter moved through the guests. Men with blood money watches and women with diamond throats, all of them staring at Clara's body before they looked at her face. Clara felt every look land. She had spent her whole life feeling rooms decide she was too much before she had spoken a word. Too wide for narrow aisles. Too heavy for delicate chairs. Too visible to be ignored, yet somehow still treated as invisible. But tonight, in that dress, under those chandeliers, she did not shrink. Her feet stayed planted on the runner, as if the marble itself had chosen her side. The badge wallet shook once in her hand, then went steady. Dante's eyes narrowed. A lesser man would have shouted. Dante only lifted 2 fingers. Instantly, the side doors locked. The click rolled across the hall like a sentence. Rocco DeSantis, Dante's underboss, stopped smiling near the witness table. Clara saw it. One blinked too fast. One hand moving toward the folder beside the wine-dark velvet chair. She had been right. Her throat tightened, but her voice stayed low. That document was not filed through the county chain. Vivian's smile sharpened. She can't even stand at an altar without making it about herself. Dante finally stepped down 1 marble stair. The movement made every bodyguard in the hall adjust their stance. His black suit absorbed the candlelight. His ring flashed once as his hand hovered over the license. "Who are you?" he asked, each word quiet enough to make the whole room lean in. To stop a Moretti wedding, Clara lowered the badge just enough for him to see the seal stamped behind her name. Not all of it, just enough. Dante's gaze dropped to the credential, then to the marriage license, then to the small embossed county mark near the bottom corner. For the first time that night, his expression changed. Not softened, not warmed, changed. Because the seal on Clara's badge and the seal on the paper waiting for his signature did not match. The mismatched seal sat between them like a loaded gun. Dante Moretti did not look away from it, and Clara did not lower the badge wallet. Around them, the wedding hall held its breath, orchids trembling, guests frozen with champagne halfway to their mouths, bodyguards waiting for permission to turn suspicion into violence. Vivian's smile remained polished, but Rocco's hand had gone still on the velvet chair. Clara saw the panic he tried to bury. She also saw Dante notice that she had seen it. "Nobody touches the license," Dante said. For words, soft as smoke, and the room obeyed. Clara had spent most of her life in rooms that did not obey anything she said. At the county clerk's office, men in expensive coats leaned over her counter and spoke to her as if her body made her mind smaller. Brides looked past her while she corrected their paperwork. Mothers whispered when she knelt to pin a hem, and grooms joked that someone her size must know a lot about wedding cake. Clara had learned to keep her face calm and her hands precise. People who underestimated her always became careless. They left names visible. They left dates exposed. They said dangerous things in front of the woman they believed was only there to stamp forms and carry fabric. That morning, before the Moretti ceremony, she had arrived through the service entrance carrying a garment bag, not a weapon. Her white dress had not been a fantasy. It had been a disguise forced by timing, by a missing bride, by a marriage license that should have passed through her county desk, but had appeared under a private courier seal instead. She had been asked to adjust a bridal gown for a woman who never came. Then she had seen the witness line. One signature belonged to a dead notary. Another had been filed 6 hours before the office opened. Clara had not screamed. She had folded the paper back into its sleeve, slid her badge wallet beneath the inner layer of satin, and walked toward the altar because the aisle was the only place wide enough for the truth to stand in public. Now every stair in the hall pressed against her skin. She felt the old wound open, the familiar judgment, the silent verdict that a woman like her should apologize for taking up space in silk and candlelight. But the pressure did not bend her. Her soft shoulders stayed squared. Her feet stayed planted. The same body they mocked made her impossible to brush aside without everyone seeing the cruelty. Vivian stepped closer, perfume sharp as cut glass. You altered a dress, and now you think you can alter a family contract? Clara's eyes did not leave the folder. I think someone already did. A murmur passed through the guests. Not belief. Not yet. Curiosity, which in a mafia room was more dangerous than pity. Dante turned his black onyx ring slowly with his thumb. He had not defended her, but he had not dismissed her either. That was how powerful men tested truth, by leaving it alone under pressure to see if it collapsed. Clara did not collapse. She noticed the priest's hands shaking near the registry book. She noticed Rocco angle his body between the nearest camera and the witness table. She noticed a faint red smear of sealing wax on his cuff, the exact shade missing from the license folder. Her pulse struck hard once, then steadied. Dante followed her gaze to Rocco's sleeve. His expression did not change, but the temperature of the hall seemed to drop. A bodyguard stepped toward Clara. She lifted one hand before he reached her. Not afraid, not pleading. A boundary. If you take the wallet from me, she said quietly, you break the chain of custody. The bodyguard stopped. Dante's eyes sharpened for the first time, not at her body, not at her dress, but at the mind working behind her stillness. He gave a small nod toward the locked side chapel. Bring her inside, he said. Then, after a pause that made Vivian's face tighten, and bring the camera footage. The locked side chapel opened like a mouth of polished oak and swallowed Clara before the wedding guests could decide whether she was a criminal, a joke, or a woman who had just placed a knife beneath the throat of a mafia alliance. 2 Moretti bodyguards moved beside her, not touching, but close enough that the air around her felt owned. Behind them, a 3rd man carried the cream folder on a silver tray, as if paper could bleed. Dante entered last. He did not hurry. He did not look back. The hall went silent, because everyone understood that when Dante Moretti chose a private room, someone's life usually changed inside it. The chapel was smaller than the wedding hall, but colder. White marble saints stared down from shadowed niches. A velvet-covered table waited beneath a narrow, stained-glass window, and on it sat a laptop already blinking with security footage from 3 camera angles. Clara stood near the table, still in the white dress that had made strangers cruel, her broad frame filling the narrow aisle between 2 rows of carved pews. She felt the bodyguards watching the way people always watched her in tight spaces, waiting for discomfort, waiting for apology. She gave them neither. Her badge wallet stayed in her hand, pressed against her palm like a heartbeat. Dante removed one black glove finger by finger. The black onyx signet ring caught the chapel light, heavy and absolute, a small dark crown on his hand. You stopped my wedding, he said. His voice was quiet enough to make the laptop seem loud. Clara met his eyes. Someone used your wedding. One guard shifted. Another inhaled sharply, offended on behalf of the man who owned half the docks and most of the men pretending not to fear him. Dante only watched her. He had the kind of stillness that made violence feel scheduled, not emotional. His empire lived in that stillness. Black SUVs outside the cathedral, port manifests disappearing at midnight, judges who returned calls, men who lowered their voices when the Moretti name crossed a room. Clara knew enough from county records to understand that powerful families did not always need guns. Sometimes they needed signatures. Sometimes they needed a woman everyone ignored to stamp the wrong page. Dante pointed to the chair opposite him. Clara did not sit until he did. It was a small thing, but his eyes noticed it. "Play it," he ordered. Footage filled the screen. The witness table, the folder, Rocco's shoulder blocking one camera for exactly 7 seconds. Vivian Cross appeared at the edge of the frame, silver dress shimmering like a blade under candlelight, her hand brushing the folder before she smiled toward the aisle. Clara leaned closer, not touching the laptop. "Stop there." Dante lifted one finger. The footage froze. Clara indicated the lower corner of the folder. The wax seal was already cracked before the priest opened it. Fresh wax shines under warm light. "That one is dull." A bodyguard scoffed under his breath. "You can see that from a camera?" Clara glanced at him once. "I alter gowns under worse lighting than this." For the first time, Dante's gaze dropped to her hands. Steady, careful, not delicate but precise. The hands of a woman who had pinned satin, stamped licenses, and carried humiliation without letting it blunt her accuracy. The chapel door clicked open behind them. Vivian stepped in without being invited, dragging the attention back to her perfect posture and diamond throat. Her smile was soft, public, poisonous. "Dante, surely you are not letting the seamstress interrogate your family records." Clara felt the insult land, but her fingers closed tighter around the badge wallet instead of her pride. Dante did not answer Vivian. He turned the laptop toward Clara and asked, "What else did you see?" Before Clara could speak, Vivian's eyes slid over the white dress and stopped at Clara's waist with deliberate cruelty. Beside the gown, working harder than everyone in this room, the chapel went dead silent. Vivian's words hung in the chapel like perfume over poison. Even the bodyguards looked away for half a second, not because they pitied Clara, but because cruelty spoken that prettily made men uncomfortable. Clara felt heat rise under the lace at her throat. She had heard versions of that sentence in bridal shops, county offices, courthouse elevators, always softened by laughter, always designed to remind her that her body entered every room before her authority did. But she did not touch her waist. She did not hide behind her arms. She stood in the narrow aisle, white skirt brushing both pews, badge wallet still held at chest height, and let the silence make Vivian's ugliness visible. Vivian tilted her head, diamonds flashing. "Look at her, Dante." She pins one hem, stamps one form, and suddenly she thinks the Moretti family should kneel because she found a smudge. Rocco DeSantis stepped into the doorway behind her, his expression arranged into insulted loyalty. "Boss, this is exactly how the feds work now. They send in someone harmless, someone nobody questions." His eyes slid to Clara's dress. "Someone who takes up enough space to block every camera while she plants out." The accusation struck harder than the insult. A few men in the chapel shifted their hands closer to their jackets. Clara's thumb pressed against the leather edge of her badge wallet, feeling the small ridge where her father's photograph was tucked behind the credential. "Never sign what you haven't read." She breathed once, slow, and watched Rocco instead of Vivian. Dante remained seated at the velvet table, his face unreadable, black onyx ring resting beside the cream folder. He did not defend Clara. He did not dismiss Rocco. He let the room tighten until every lie had to show its shape. Vivian crossed to the table and placed 2 manicured fingers on the folder as if touching evidence made it hers. This woman was hired through a service entrance. She wore a dress meant for someone else. She interrupted vows she was never meant to understand. And now she wants you to believe her over your own blood. Clara's voice came out low. "Rocco is not your blood." That made the chapel still. Rocco smiled without warmth. "Careful, clerk." A bodyguard reached for Clara's badge wallet. Clara lifted it back just enough to deny him without flinching. Touching it without logging transfer contaminates the chain. Vivian laughed, soft and vicious. Listen to her. Chain of custody. Such expensive words from a woman who probably hemmed that gown for free just to feel chosen. The wound opened cleanly. For one breath, Clara saw herself reflected in the chapel window. Too visible, too judged, too alone in white. Then her eyes dropped to Vivian's fingers on the folder. A crescent of red wax sat beneath one nail. Not old wax. Fresh. The same shade missing from the cracked county seal. Dante saw Clara's gaze sharpen. His hand moved toward the fountain pen beside the unsigned license. Not to sign, but close enough to make every pulse in the room jump. Rocco slid the folder an inch toward him. Let her prove it, Rocco said. Have her sign a statement that she broke the seal herself. Clara stared at the folder, the wax, the pen, and the witness line turned upside down beneath the glass. Then she saw it. The dead notary's signature was not written in ink at all. It was printed. The dead notary's signature was printed. Clara did not shout it. She did not gasp or point like a frightened bride begging the powerful men to believe her. She moved. Before Dante's hand could reach the fountain pen, before Rocco could slide the folder fully beneath his control, Clara stepped forward and placed her own palm flat on the velvet table, pinning the license beneath the shadow of her badge wallet. The room reacted instantly. 2 bodyguards shifted toward her. Vivian's lips parted in outrage. Rocco's smile vanished for half a second. Clara's soft, heavy presence filled the narrow space between Dante and the paper. Not frantic, not clumsy, but immovable. Do not touch that pen, she said. The words were quiet, but they landed harder than a scream. Dante's eyes lifted to hers. Nobody breathed. Rocco recovered first. She's obstructing you, boss. Clara did not look at him. No, I'm preserving evidence. She turned the license 1 inch, just enough for the chapel light to catch the witness line. Her fingers were steady, the same fingers that had pinned satin hems while brides insulted her under their breath, the same fingers that had stamped county forms men never bothered to read. This signature was never written. Vivian gave a thin laugh. Now she's a handwriting expert. No, Clara said. I'm a records clerk, which means I know the difference between wet ink and toner. The silence changed. It stopped being mocking. It became hungry. Clara lifted her badge wallet and angled its gold credential beside the license seal. The notary listed here died 11 months ago. His commission expired before this filing date. In this line, she tapped the paper once, carefully without smearing anything. Has no pressure grooves. No drag. No human hesitation. Someone printed his name onto a forged county form and cracked the seal afterward to make it look handled. A murmur broke through the chapel. Rocco's jaw tightened. Vivian's hand curled, hiding the red wax beneath her nail too late. Dante noticed. Clara noticed that he noticed. That is ridiculous, Vivian snapped. You expect everyone here to trust the woman who stole a bride's dress and waved a badge like a prop. Clara finally looked at her. The humiliation was still there, hot under her ribs, but it no longer ruled the room. I expect them to trust the paper. It tells the truth even when people don't. Rocco lunged for the folder. Clara shifted her weight and held the table edge with both hands, anchoring herself between him and the evidence. The velvet bunched beneath her palms. The folder did not move. For 1 sharp second, every cruel whisper ever aimed at her body reversed into something useful. She was not easy to move. She was not easy to erase. She was not leaving the evidence unguarded because a thinner, richer woman told the room she did not belong. A bodyguard reached for Rocco, then stopped, waiting for Dante. Dante had gone utterly still. His black onyx ring rested beside Clara's badge, 2 kinds of power separated by less than an inch. Nobody moves, he said. The chapel froze. Dante leaned over the license, not touching it, his dark gaze following the printed signature, the cracked seal, the red wax on Vivian's nail, and finally Clara's steady hands. For the first time, he looked at her as if the room had been built wrong around the only person standing in the right place. "Clear the chapel," he ordered. "Everyone out except Miss Whitaker." Vivian went pale. Rocco's eyes flicked toward the laptop. Dante saw that too. He slid the cream folder toward Clara instead of himself and asked, very softly, "How much of my wedding was forged? How much of my wedding was forged?" Dante's question did not rise above a whisper, yet it seemed to press against the stone walls until the chapel itself held still. Clara kept her palm near the cream folder, close enough to guard it, careful enough not to touch the printed signature again. Everyone else had been pushed outside except 2 bodyguards at the door and the blinking laptop on the velvet table. Vivian's perfume still lingered in the air like a threat. Rocco's shadow had disappeared behind the oak door, but Clara could feel the danger he left behind, coiled and waiting. She looked at Dante's black onyx ring resting beside the folder, then at her badge wallet, the worn leather suddenly looking painfully small next to Moretti Power. "Enough to make the vows meaningless," she said. "Enough to make the alliance look legal. Not enough to fool someone who files these for a living." Dante did not smile. He reached for the license, then stopped before touching it. That restraint was the first sign he had truly heard her. "Show me." Clara swallowed the ache in her throat and turned the document with 2 fingertips on the blank margin. "The seal is wrong. The pressure is wrong. The filing number belongs to a license issued last spring in Queens. The witness line was printed, not signed. And the courier stamp," she pointed to the lower edge, "uses a private route your family doesn't use for legitimate records." One bodyguard's eyes flicked to Dante, as if expecting anger. Dante gave none. His gaze stayed on Clara's hands. They were steady, but not untouched by fear. He noticed that too. "You memorize county filing routes?" he asked. "I memorize patterns," Clara said. "People lie. Paper repeats itself." The laptop chimed as the camera footage looped again. Dante turned it toward her without speaking. A test. Clara knew it instantly. He was not asking because he trusted her. He was asking because if she failed now, every insult Vivian had thrown would become the room's official truth. Clara leaned in. The chapel light caught the curve of her cheek, the white satin at her shoulder, the badge still open beside her hand. For years, people had looked at her and assumed softness meant weakness, size meant slowness, silence meant emptiness. None of those assumptions helped them now. She watched the footage once, then lifted a finger. "There." Rocco blocks the camera before Vivian touches the folder. 7 seconds. Long enough to swap the top sheet, not the whole packet. That means the original is still nearby, or he needed your signature on the forged version before anyone compared it. Dante's eyes shifted to the door. The temperature dropped. "You are certain?" Clara met his stare. "No, I am careful." Certainty comes after verification. Something changed in him then, subtle and dangerous. Not warmth. Respect. The kind given rarely, and only to weapons that had proven sharp. He slid the black onyx ring away from the folder, leaving Clara's badge closest to the evidence. "Then verify it." A breath caught in her chest. "I'll need access to the county portal, the camera export, and no one from your family touching this folder until I log transfer." The nearest guard bristled. Dante lifted one hand. The guard went still. "Give her what she asks for." Clara felt the command move through the room like a lock turning. For the first time that night, Moretti Power did not press against her. It formed a wall around the evidence she had protected. Dante stepped closer, close enough that she could see a thin scar at his jaw and the unreadable darkness in his eyes. "If you are lying," he said softly, "you will not leave this chapel the same woman who entered it." Clara did not flinch. "If I am right, neither will you." The silence after that was sharp enough to cut velvet. Dante studied her for one long second, then turned toward the door. "No one touches Miss Whitaker," he ordered. "Not Vivian. Not Rocco. Not my men." His gaze returned to Clara, colder than protection, heavier than trust. "Until I know who tried to make me sign my own execution. She stays where I can see her. She stays where I can see her." The order should have sounded like a cage. In Dante Moretti's chapel, with armed men at the doors and Vivian's fury burning somewhere beyond the oak, it nearly did. Clara's fingers tightened around the badge wallet before she could stop them. Dante noticed. Of course he noticed. His dark eyes missed nothing. Not the small recoil in her hand. Not the way her shoulders squared beneath the white satin. Not the boundary forming before she spoke. "I'm not your prisoner," Clara said. Quiet. Steady. The nearest bodyguard looked as if no one had ever corrected Dante Moretti and remained standing. Dante did not blink. "No," he said. "You're the only person in this building who may know where the blade is hidden." The answer was not soft. It was not an apology, but it left her room to breathe. Clara looked at the locked door, then at the laptop, then at the cream folder lying between her badge and his black onyx ring. Two kinds of authority sat on that velvet table. Hers worn at the edges from county counters and late nights, his polished dark by bloodlines and fear. Neither belonged to the other. "Not yet. Then I need a terminal that connects to the county portal," she said. "A clean export of the camera footage. Gloves. Evidence bags. And your men outside the room, not hovering over my shoulder." One guard made a low sound of disbelief. Dante lifted one finger. The guard stepped back. Clara felt the shift like air returning to her lungs. Moretti power was still dangerous, still surrounding her. But for this moment, it moved around the boundary she had drawn instead of crushing it. Dante opened the side door himself, revealing a narrow corridor lined with black marble and velvet wall panels. Beyond it waited a private sacristy converted into a security room, all monitors, locked drawers, and a single steel desk beneath a crucifix. Clara walked in first because Dante allowed it, and because she refused to be hurted. Her dress brushed the doorframe, full and white and impossible to ignore. A younger guard glanced at the fabric with the same old judgment in his face. Clara saw it, absorbed it, and sat down at the steel desk without shrinking. The chair creaked once. She kept her spine straight. Dante's gaze cut to the guard. The man looked at the floor. No words. No homasi. Just a warning delivered by silence. Clara logged into the county portal with careful hands. The badge wallet lay open beside the keyboard, her father's tiny photograph hidden behind the credential. Dante stood behind her left shoulder, not close enough to touch, close enough that she could feel the controlled violence of him, like winter at her back. "You always this calm when someone tries to ruin a wedding?" he asked. Clara clicked through the filing numbers. "I'm not calm. You look calm. That's because people listen better when I don't give them the reaction they came for." Dante said nothing for a long moment. On the monitor, the real license record loaded. Different witness, different courier, different bride names still redacted behind county privacy locks. Clara's pulse kicked. She opened the camera export beside it and saw Rocco's 7-second blind spot line up perfectly with the forged filing time. "There," she whispered. Dante leaned closer, his shadow falling across the screen. Not touching her. Not yet. Outside the sacristy, footsteps stopped too abruptly. Clara looked toward the door. On the monitor's reflection, she saw Rocco DeSantis in the corridor, staring not at Dante, not at the folder, but at the open badge wallet beside Clara's hand. His face went still with the look of a man realizing the smallest object in the room could end him. Rocco did not look like a frightened man. Frightened men sweated, stammered, begged. Rocco DeSantis simply became very still, and in the Moretti world, stillness was more dangerous than panic. Clara saw his eyes fix on the open badge wallet beside her hand, then flick to the county portal glowing on the screen. He understood too late that the evidence was no longer just paper in a chapel folder. It had a chain now. It had timestamps. It had her name attached to it. Dante turned his head toward the corridor a fraction of an inch. "Rocco," he said, quiet as a closing grave. Rocco smiled. "Boss, you have a problem." His hand lifted, and two men at the far end of the corridor moved before Dante's bodyguards could fully react. Not strangers. Moretti men. That was what made the room go cold. Betrayal did not enter with a mask. It wore the same black suit as loyalty. One of them reached for the security room breaker panel. The monitors blinked once. Clara knew that kind of blink. Not power failure. Manual interruption. Rocco was not trying to argue anymore. He was trying to erase the room. Step away from the terminal. Miss Whitaker, Rocco said. You've caused enough confusion. Clara's heart slammed hard enough to hurt, but her hands stayed where they were. One on the desk edge, one near the badge wallet. Dante moved, but Rocco's second man drew just enough steel from beneath his jacket to freeze everyone into calculation. Not a gun fully raised. Not yet. Enough threat to turn the narrow sacristy into a trap. Clara looked at the screen. The county upload bar was only halfway complete. The local camera export sat beside it, vulnerable. If the power died before the transfer logged, Rocco could bury the footage, the forged seal, maybe even her with it. She did not ask Dante to save the file. She used the only thing in the room no one had respected enough to fear: her own position. Clara rose from the chair and planted herself between Rocco and the steel desk. White satin filled the narrow space. Her soft shoulders squared. Her body became a wall, not graceful, not delicate, but present in a way no one could slip past without making their violence visible. You touched that breaker, she said, and the audit log records interference during an active county evidence hold. Rocco's smile twitched. Bluffing again. No, Clara said, lifting the badge wallet without moving aside. Working. Her thumb pressed the small credential tab inside the leather case. The county portal chimed once. A red banner appeared across the screen. External review hold initiated. Dante's eyes cut to the monitor. So did Rocco's. Clara had not saved everything, but she had saved enough. The system had captured the timestamp, her credential, the file number, and the interruption attempt. Rocco lunged. Dante's bodyguard caught one of his men, but Rocco himself went for the desk, hand outstretched toward the laptop. Clara did not retreat. She braced both palms against the steel edge and held her ground as a shoulder struck the side of the chair and the desk scraped 1 inch across the marble. The sound screamed through the room. The badge wallet slid, but Clara caught it against her hip before it fell. For one brutal second, the old judgment in every room returned. Move her, shove her, make her smaller, get around her. This time they could not. Not without exposing exactly what they were. Dante saw it all. The forged wedding, the stolen witness line, the traitor wearing his colors, and the woman in white holding the center of the room by refusing to disappear. His voice dropped into something lethal. Rocco. The underboss froze with one hand inches from the laptop. On the screen, the audit banner turned green. Transfer accepted. Clara exhaled once, shaking now, but still standing. Dante looked from the save file to Clara's badge, then to the space she had refused to surrender. For the second time that night, she had put herself between him and execution. And this time, everyone in the room knew it. The audit banner turned green, and Rocco DeSantis lost the last inch of room he had left to lie. Transfer accepted. Those two plain county words glowed brighter than every chandelier in the cathedral. Clara stood between the steel desk and the traitor, one hand closed around her badge wallet, the other pressed to the edge of the table, breathing hard but still upright. Dante looked at her, then at the save file, then at Rocco's hand hovering uselessly above the laptop. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Take him, he said. The bodyguards moved like a door slamming shut. Rocco fought for half a second, just long enough to prove guilt had muscles. Then one of Dante's men forced him to his knees on the marble. Clara did not smile. The room was too cold for victory. Her knees trembled beneath the white dress, but she stayed standing because sitting down would have felt too much like disappearing. Dante stepped past Rocco and opened the chapel doors himself. Beyond them, the wedding hall waited in a beautiful, poisonous silence. The guests turned as Clara came out first. Not behind Dante, not between guards. First, her veil was crooked, the hem of her dress brushed with dust from the security room, and the badge wallet was still in her hand. This time, no one laughed. Vivian stood near the altar with her diamonds at her throat and fresh wax hidden poorly beneath one polished nail. Dante followed Clara down the aisle, black suit against white flowers, his onyx ring catching the light like a dark verdict. At the witness table, Clara placed the badge wallet beside the forged license. Then she set the exported camera drive next to it. Her voice was quiet, but the hall carried every word. The witness signature was printed. The notary is dead. The filing number belongs to another license. The seal was cracked after substitution, and the interruption attempt has been logged through County Review. A murmur moved through the council members seated in the first rows. Not pity, fear, respect beginning its painful work. Vivian's smile shattered. This is absurd. She is a seamstress. Clara looked at her then, not with anger, but with the exhaustion of a woman who had spent years watching cruel people mistake job titles for worth. I'm the records clerk you should have ignored more carefully. The word struck harder than any slap. Dante turned to the council. Vivian Cross, offer my family a marriage built on forged records. Rocco DeSantis, try to make me sign it. Every account tied to the Cross Alliance is frozen by morning. Every port contract Rocco touched is under review tonight. Every man who helped him chooses now whether he serves Moretti or kneels beside him. Chairs scraped. Men who had laughed at Clara an hour earlier lowered their eyes. Vivian reached for her clutch, but a guard removed it before her fingers closed. Rocco stared at Clara with hatred and, something worse, recognition. The woman he had called harmless had ended him with a wallet, a timestamp, and the nerve not to move. Dante walked to Clara and stopped close enough for the crowd to feel the shift without mistaking it for romance offered too cheaply. He removed the black onyx signet ring from his hand. The sound passed through the room, sharp and shocked. Clara's breath caught. Dante, she said, a warning and a boundary in one word. His eyes held hers. Not ownership. He placed the ring in her open palm, beside the badge wallet. Authority. The hall went utterly still. Clara Whitaker, save my name, my house, and every man in this room too blind to see the blade at the altar. From this night forward, no contract bearing the Moretti seal is valid unless she has read it. No council vote concerning my family records happens without her voice in the room. You will address her as Donna Whitaker until she chooses another name. Clara looked at the ring, heavy and cold against her skin, then at the guests who had stared at her body before her face. Now they stared at her hands, one holding the badge that proved the truth, the other holding the seal that granted power. Vivian was escorted out past the aisle she had tried to own. Rocco was dragged after her, no longer underboss, no longer blood, no longer believed. Clara did not feel smaller. She did not feel chosen like a prize. She felt seen in the full weight of herself, soft, steady, unbroken, and impossible to erase. Dante stood beside her, not in front of her, as the council rose. One by one, the men who had mocked the heaviest bride bowed their heads to the deadliest ally the Moretti family had ever had.